Morning, everyone. Today is Tuesday, October 3rd, 2017. This is a regular meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. Before we call the roll, let's begin by taking a moment of silence and reflect on the enormous tragedy that occurred in Las Vegas 2 nights ago. Let's take that moment of silence first to mourn the passing of the 59 innocent victims, to also to comfort their friends and families, to also wish a speedy and complete recovery for the 540-some injured, and also to thank the first responders both on and off duty, as well as just the plain folks in the crowd whose heroic actions saved many more deaths, injuries, and tragedies. Let's take that moment of silence. Thank you. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Good morning. Let the record reflect Commissioner Soboroff, Johnson, Figueroa Villa, McLean Hill, and Goldsmith are present, and we have a quorum. Number 1 on the agenda, consent agenda items. We have comment cards on all 4 items.
Okay, how many comment cards do we have?
A total of 5.
Okay, let's do 1A first.
1A, we have Herman.
Is Herman also on 1B, 1C, and 1D?
Yes. Yes, he is.
So, Mr. Herman, you can do them one at a... I don't know where he is. Mr. Herman?
Herman?
You have comments on 1A, B, C, and D. You can do them all collectively. You can do them one at a time. Your choice. Go ahead.
I prefer one at a time.
Okay, so we're just going to do 1A. Are there any other comments on 1A?
No, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I don't have my glasses, but I'll try my best. Regarding the Dodgers Area Cadet Program, this is my conclusion that we must hold these programs in reference to children because, again, psychologically, you've caused some problems to some children. It's just not the one child that was being fucked by an adult man for whose service of 10 years violated their rights. After all, California law states that you have to be 18 and over to be an adult to consent to sex. But when you fuck a minor, I find that offensive because in my career, I've never fucked a minor. I never will. Because I think
Show
of
me
children.
how you're at all on topic with this.
Oh, yeah. The Dodgers again. Dodgers. So,
So you weren't.
okay,
so that's your last one.
Regarding, I'm on topic, regarding $3,999 from the Los Angeles Dollars to be fucking utilized for the fucking food and the fucking recreational, for fucking activities and fucking events, for the fucking benefit, for the fucking Olympic Area Cadets Program as fucking set forth by recommendation for board fucking action. Now that I'm on fucking topic, once again, department's report dated September 27, 2017, relative to monetary fucking donations. Bingo.
We have a motion for approval of 1A.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? 1B, any speakers?
Herman
Is the only speaker?
is the only speaker.
Herman?
So now that I'm on topic, regarding department's report dated September 27th, relative to the one donation of 4 gift certificates totaling less than $200. Well, no one can get a joy or happiness out of a 4 gift $200 donations. If you do the math, it's only like $50 a gift. I like $500 gifts. You know why? Because I could do a lot with $500. $50 I could barely buy a bus pass and get along with the commissioner. Mr. Sobroff. But from the Terrace Restaurant, I want to thank them in support. Support for using prize money for holiday parties. Although, see, I'm not Jewish, nor am I any other religious organization. I don't believe in holidays. See, the last time I read in the Bible about a holiday party, they took a man's head off called John the Baptist, and they killed him because the little cute.
Off topic, last warning. Or you'll have to
I'm
give
talking
up
about
rest
the
of your
holiday
time.
party, sir. I'm doing a. Oh my God! Let me stay on topic. So, for the fucking benefit of fucking Pacific area, set forth for the fucking BPC number 170375 for board action to approve the fucking department's fucking report, fucking the Simpsons, fucking donations, and once again on topic 42 USC 1983.
Motion for approval of B.
So moved.
All in favor? Okay. C, speakers?
We have Herman, followed by Audrey George.
So, regarding the Northeast Area Cadet Program, as follows. Dated September 27th, relative to a monetary donation in the amount of $4,530 from the Los Angeles Dodgers. Now we have two sums. I'm looking at about $8,000 donations from the Dodgers. Now, what the interest of the Dodgers is to get free police escort at Dodger Stadium, I believe. And to utilize, not just for food and recreational activities, I won't talk about what those recreational activities might be because you have a cadet program. And I'm very sympathetic, not apologetic, when it comes to Northeast cadet programs. Because the history of the cadet programs has proven a failed system due to lack of supervision, lack of civility, morality, and ethics. So let's just keep it simple. There was no board action, and just as I mentioned, they'll approve it. The report will be accepted, the donation will be taken, and it's totaling, like I said, $9,000 based on consent agenda item A and C. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Audrey George.
Hi. It's so disheartening, although probably not surprising, that when there recently was the 29th sexual assault of a minor in either the Explorer Cadet program in about 40 years, that you have not even paused. It's just business as usual. You continue throwing money, letting people fund these programs. As you know, many in the community feel that the program should be totally disbanded to protect these young people. We've appealed to those of you with children, with teenagers. We've appealed to your sense of having a moral compass and realizing how wrong it is to just keep letting this go on. None of you have really spoken out about how wrong it is. You've talked about, with this last one, Chief Beck, how there was no intimidation. Any young person whose supervisor has a badge and a gun, and you can tell us that there was no intimidation, that they felt free to make their own decision about whether to be raped by a police officer many years older. It's just disgusting. Thank you.
We have a motion for approval of item number 1D.
So moved.
This is D or C?
C.
C?
Item
1C.
C. 1C.
Okay. Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Item 1D for $144.
We have one speaker, Herman.
Well, we definitely need training, right? How important is training? Well, let's ask the gunman in Vegas about the training he had. But the subject is not about Vegas, it's about adequate service provided training for the benefit of our West Los Angeles area police. Now, do we have a audit that shows how many trained officers are trained without having a trigger-happy loose finger on the trigger? Do we have any statistics on that? Because relative to the process of these fees for the value of just $144, that's not very much. We got fine rank and file in here that need maybe about $200,000 worth of training. This way, Ezell Ford would not have gotten killed. See, when police are trained with adequate services under programs and activities, they too fall under the category of the DOJ, which Mr. Sobroff doesn't understand because, once again, federal and state funding is adequate enough to train all our rank and file so that the public is not subjected to bodily harm, the liability of a loose finger, and inadequate training. So whenever we have a shooting like we had in Vegas, I'll give you a scenario. When God rained down on Sodom and Gomorrah, he let fire come down upon the people because they were wicked and evil. And God allowed it to happen. Now, what happened in Vegas stays in Vegas.
I'll move approval of item number 1D.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Agenda item, we'll do 2A and 2B. Do any of the commissioners feel like a presentation is needed on either?
I would like to talk about item 1A.
Okay, it's 2A.
Or
Okay,
2A
so,
rather.
let's see, who's here for 2A, I think. Hi, Lieutenant. Hi. Want to just identify yourselves, and then we'll go right to Commissioner questions.
Good morning, absolutely. I'm Lieutenant Kelly Arnett. I'm a OIC at Audit Division. With me,
Carol Charnay, I'm a Police Performance Auditor 3, Audit Division.
Good morning.
Hold on, there's a third. No, go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry.
Anne Marie Sauer, Fiscal Operations Division.
Good morning. When was the prior audit done on this? Was it 8 years ago?
It was
2008, 2009.
So 6 or 7 years ago. Most of the issues you identified were identified in the prior audit, right?
Yes.
yes.
So the question is really for the department, not for the audit team. But this audit's many years old at this point, and most of the issues that were identified have not been corrected from the last audit. So what's the plan to get these resolved in a timely way? And then back to you, I would like to know when you recommend we have a follow-up audit to make sure that the corrections are actually made. Is 120 days enough time, or 6 months?
Actually, the issues with the reconciliations, FOD is actually handled that, and I'll let Ms. Sauer handle the response to that. And also on 4D, Property Division, the expired holds have been completely eliminated. Property Division has come up with a system where they're printing out the expired hold and getting it to Detective Bureau. So
So that issue's been resolved?
That's issue's been
Okay.
resolved.
And then on the reconciliation?
Right, it's really just the issue, there's the monthly report, which we're now doing, so that recommendation number 1 has been implemented. And then recommendation number 2, in terms of the unreconciled items, that's one of those where, in spite of best efforts, we actually had an accountant working on this who went back, who was dedicated to a full-time, went as far back as 1993, but was unsuccessful in funding the specific transaction accumulating to that amount. I mean, the reality is that the APM system was obviously set up for evidentiary purposes, and it's not an accounting system. And as far as we can tell, that's really the problem that we continue to run into with it. So, and I think, as you know, I mean, we worked, well, our challenge getting funding for technology every year as part of the city budget process, I'm sure is part of this, because FOD was previously involved in conversations about some upgrades to the system, modifications, but those changes have not occurred, so.
So other than the amount that's, what, 15 years old almost now?
Right.
You're confident that the account has been successfully reconciled year to year?
Correct. So it's reconciled year to year. We're doing the monthly review. We're working with property division. And then we're also sending the quarterly reports to the city for the eschewment to the general fund. So.
Okay. Does that satisfy all the issues identified on the audit then?
Yes, because there was an older unreconciled item that they've identified and set aside, and going forward, they'll be able to clear the more recent items.
Okay. All right, I'm satisfied.
And we will continue to see funding to upgrade ACOMS.
Yep.
ACOMS is an old legacy system of ours that doesn't meet our needs.
Okay.
As many.
Any other commissioner questions? Okay, do public comments on item number 2A?
We have one comment card. Herman?
Wow, 2008, and we're in 2017. And Ms. Sauer there made it very clear. We continue to have problems with upgrades. Now, with all this loose money by donations, maybe we should sacrifice a few events and put that money to use to provide adequate equipment and services for audits. This way the money doesn't get interchanged, as I would call it, padding your wallets. But again, DACA and Sanctuary Cities isn't a part of this audit. It should be. I don't believe that anyone has a benefit service and a program like the rest of us Americans should have. Isn't that what an audit is supposed to do? Provide us monies so that claims of people being injured are paid off immediately as a pre-settlement, like Michael Hunt, for the record, or better, Wayne Spindler. But you see, Mr. Tiefenk, from dated September 27, 2017, the unclaimed monies audit, even you don't know what the amount is. The public should know. I thought we had a topic here about transparency. Why can't we put a drone up in the air and shine some transparency on monies on the audit? You know, those little drones can carry cameras and can beam down a little projection and have us all understand what the monies and audits are going to. Otherwise, you know, I can't afford a nice fancy suit like yours, Mr. Tiefenk.
Stay on
I have no
topic.
monies.
Last warning.
Pardon me?
No, time's up anyway. Okay.
Pardon me? Okay, time's up. Thank you.
We have a motion for approval of, a motion for approval of item number 2A, please.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Item number 2B, are there any commissioner questions on item 2B for Mr. Thompson? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any questions, anyone?
Nope.
Okay, may we have any public comments on 2B?
We have one public comment card. Herman?
That name's a special name tonight. Whew. Narcotics analyst. What is a narcotic analyst? Does anyone here help me with that, Mr. Tiefenk? How about you, Mr. Chair? I don't think there's enough information on this agenda to give me the specific criteria of what relative narcotics analysts BBC 17/0378 laboratory trust fund is. Maybe if we recruited USC students and UCLA students, they could do a better analysis on their laboratory on narcotics. See, the backlog goes back probably from 2008 or even further past that. But there's not enough material for the public to read on the back of this room to come up with an idea of what the narcotics analysis laboratory report trust fund is, or as you call it, expenditure. So is that to say that you can expend on one particular laboratory experiment over another. I prefer to use $250,000 on this narcotic analyst and pay for outside counsel to do another laboratory. We don't know. So the question remains in your hand. Have appropriate information for the public to dialogue with you on this subject. Otherwise, no one knows, no one cares, and no one understands such transparency.
I submitted a card for this
I don't show a card with your name
You can do it
on
during,
for this item.
during public comment. Okay, we have a motion for approval of item 2B.
So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, item number 2C. Before we begin item number 2C, I would like to ask Mr. Tefank to state what the process has been, what we are doing today, and what the process is from today up to the time when a policy would be adopted by this commission. Mr. Tefank?
Good morning, Mr. President, members of the commission. Yes, the process began on August 8th of 2017 when the department came to the commission with a presentation on requesting to hold community meetings to begin the process to develop a proposed order or guidelines that relevant to the use of unmanned aerial systems. That process began. The department held community meetings. Coming before you today will be the department with their report, which is the proposed guidelines, which means that the guidelines are just that. They are proposed. No program has been implemented. The action before you today requested is to review the guidelines. If you accept the guidelines as is, they would be posted on the department website for 2 weeks to allow communication from the public. The meeting 2 weeks hence from today would come back to you for final approval, again with public comment at that point in time. And any modifications to the proposed guidelines before you today could be made at that time. Also today, if the commission chose to make some changes to the proposed guidelines today, you could do that also, and then they would be posted on the website for public input. So again, today your action is to not adopt a policy. It is to accept the proposed guidelines or to modify them, and then direct the department to post them for 2 weeks of public comment.
I'll reject them too.
Bring it back to the commission for your final action.
Okay, thank you. The subcommittee on this issue was created and has been run by Commissioners Goldsmith and Commissioner Johnson. I would like to turn this portion of the agenda over to Commissioner Goldsmith for your comments and guidance. I would like to also hear from each of the commissioners if they have thoughts or prospective modifications. Then we will open it up to the public for public comment.
Well,
and there will
It might be worthwhile. I
go
think
ahead.
Commissioner Goldsmith has some opening remarks, but then maybe we have the department actually present
Yes.
the policy, and then the commissioners can ask questions and open up for public
Right.
comment.
Yep. Okay.
Do you want to have that department come up?
Commissioner Goldsmith?
This is clearly an issue that has sparked debate in the community and demand for careful consideration. I have heard these concerns personally and in depth at the community meeting I attended and at these commission meetings. Some people are afraid these devices will infringe on our privacy, that they will eventually be weaponized. People fear a slippery slope toward mission creep. I take these concerns seriously. Our challenge is to create a policy that strikes a balance, that promotes public safety, the safety of our officers, and does not infringe on individual privacy rights. The best way to do that is through a strong policy that creates maximum transparency, accountability, and oversight. I believe this proposed policy does that. Number one is a 1-year pilot that will be thoroughly evaluated. 2, it has strict and narrow limitations on deployment for the sole purposes of resolving dangerous, high-risk tactical situations, and improving situational awareness during natural disasters and catastrophic incidents. 3, it has strong checks and balances, including commander-level approval, search warrant requirements, and frequent reporting to our subcommittee and a report to the full board and the public. And finally, no weapons capabilities whatsoever. I want to thank the department and especially Chief Grimala for working closely with us to create this policy, for doing community outreach, which may not have been perfect, but helped us to understand community concerns and craft a policy that is responsive to those concerns, and for holding the department to the highest standard of transparency and accountability while keeping our communities and our officers safe. I'm eager to hear additional public input on the draft policy today and over the next 2 weeks before we make a final decision. Thank you.
Chief?
Thank you so much. Good morning, Commissioners, Chief Beck, Mr. Teefank, Mr. Sibley. Thank you for the opportunity for me to return here and do a follow-up presentation regarding the proposed guidelines, some feedback also on what the department has been engaged in since we last met. The department has been doing an ongoing review and also a study of policies that exist throughout the United States, also guideline recommendations that have been put forth through different governmental entities. Those include the Department of Homeland Security, the FAA, the Department of Justice, the International Associations of Chiefs of Police. And all of these will continue to be evaluated and weighed in on throughout this pilot program process. In addition, we did not begin serious work on these guidelines until after the community input that we received, and I'll be going over that in detail, both the in-person and the electronic and written that we had received. So I think it's very important as we go over a summary of those community concerns that we will see how those were incorporated into our proposed guidelines here today. So after August the 8th, on August 11th, on lapdonline.org, we posted the community meetings that were held throughout the city of Los Angeles, and we chose 4 geographic bureaus to be the demarcation areas for those community meetings. One was held in Central Bureau, one in West, one in Valley, and one in South. And when we looked at the locations, we picked city facilities with public transportation access and also with access to free parking. We also ensured that Spanish-speaking translation was available at each location, and that when speaker cards were filled out as part of that process, we put no time limitations on a speaker's ability to present after the department did a presentation that was the same one that was given to the commission on August 8th. So we kept the consistency of that presentation. So we also, after that date, ensured that on August the 16th, Media Relations, through its email chain of 140, including news outlets and contact lists, also posted the community meetings, the locations, the times, so that they could get it out, hopefully through print, radio, and television, and also internet access, so that people could understand that these community meetings were taking place. So back to August 8th, after the commission meeting, Chief Beck held media availability. We did get some airtime regarding the remarks from the commission and some of that feedback as well. So the Office of Special Operations at the community meetings had representation at the command level at each of the areas to help moderate and hopefully answer some of the questions that came up. I'd like to talk a little bit about the 2 other modes that we had received information from the community. One was through an email address that was specifically set up for this purpose, and also the United States Postal Service address. We just received one letter through the snail mail, but the rest came through electronic means. And the Office of Special Operations received 1,675 emails. Of the 1,675 emails, 97 were positive, encouraging the department to go ahead and look at new technology and incorporate it as long as it was within the scope of improving community safety and officer safety, but also with the caveat that strict guidelines be incorporated into that process and that there would be a continuous review through any pilot program. 165 emails came through that were opposed to the UAS proposed initiative. And those were unique in character. Each of the authors of those 165 emails gave very thoughtful and insightful information that they felt would be relevant to any crafting of a guideline if we would go in that direction, or if we wanted to reconsider the project in totality. That was also an option that they highly recommended. Of the remaining 1,290 emails that the department received, they were not of a unique narrative. They were identical narratives. About 497 came from outside of the Los Angeles area. They came from everywhere from Florida, New Jersey, and New York. And they were encouraging the department not to adopt any type of UAS program. And I'd like to kind of give a summary now on what the issues were that were brought forward by the community as far as their concerns. There was concern that we would not be respecting constitutionally protected activities, particularly First Amendment activities, as they would generate either pre-planned or those that would be spontaneous. There was a deep, deep concern for the department in regard to respecting personal privacy. And that was a theme that was recurrent in all of the emails that had concerns about a UAS program at all. Very clear and loud and clear was the no weaponization piece. And as the department has stated, as Chief Beck has stated from the start, there will be no weaponization of any type of UAS that could be at some point in time adopted by the department. In addition, there was concern about what an approval process would look like, because as you look nationwide, there's a vast array of approval processes out there by different agencies, some agencies small, some large, where a lower level supervisor is allowed to approve the deployment of a UAS. There are also some places in the country where a UAS can be used to just fly over traffic, assess accident scenes, help with monitoring a reevaluation of traffic patterns. None of that is at all under consideration here by the Los Angeles Police Department or in these guidelines. Also, mission creep and any expansion on the use of UAS that would be left open to the department during a pilot process where we could build upon the guidelines that would be proposed. And again, that is not and never has been and is not currently or will be the department's intention as we make this presentation here today. So I think it's important for us to take a look at each of those concerns and ensure in the guideline proposal that we are presenting to you here today that they are not overlooked, they are not treated in a cavalier manner at all, they are not placated to, they're actually addressed on a very tangible level. I think also what is very unique to the department's guidelines here today is that each and every proposed deployment of the UAS system would have the ability to be approved or denied on an individual basis. This is not something that we are seeing in a lot of parts of the country, where basically it's a one-size-fits-all. It's a proposal that once you buy it, you kind of buy it in its totality. Here, there is no rubber stamp that is going to be applied to the approval process. And I'll be getting into the intricacies of that approval process here today. But I'd like to now go over an overview of what the guideline looks like and how it will appear before people actually see it posted. The guideline begins with a look on background. The department, as you know, had looked very generally in 2014, May of 2014, at the UAS systems that existed. Fast forward 3 years later to 2017, where we are looking at a system that has been reviewed. We've seen best practices. We've seen lessons learned elsewhere in the country. So we believe that a look at the guidelines and the technology today is not only timely, but it is appropriate. We lay out definitions in the first part of the guidelines, and I'd like to just go over a couple of those here with you now to touch on why the definitions are so important. And when we talk about oversight, the importance of having what we call a program manager is very critical to the accountability process here. The program manager would be a supervisor from Air Support Division. They are the subject matter experts for the department on aviation, and they would be working with the FAA to ensure that the way in which the UAS is deployed is not only safe internally, but safe to the public. It is in comport with federal guidelines and all aviation-related mandates, and this is going to be very, very important. So we have that oversight of a program manager. One of the most critical definitions that we have incorporated in the guidelines is what we call a deployment log. And the deployment log, it will be an addenda item to the guidelines you will see. The deployment log is a document that must be filled out each and every time there is a proposed deployment of a UAS. It also has a box on it which says approval or denial. So this log is not only filled out when there is an approval of the deployment of the UAS. If there's a denial of that deployment, it is also noted on here and the reasons why. Significant also is the bottom of the log. There's a 4-part signing off process on this document, so it goes through 4 additional levels of review besides the in-field review that will be taking place at the scene of a SWAT deployment. So the log will be available for people to review and to basically show the detail in which that log has been completed. Responsibilities is the next topic that the guidelines lays out. Only the Metropolitan Division Special Weapons and Tactics Team, also known as SWAT, will be allowed to use the UAS system. This is very unique also to different parts of the country and to different policies where patrol officers are also allowed to use a UAS system, or it is used more liberally. So when we talk about responsibilities, it is the SWAT team's responsibility to be trained and certified in the use of the UAS and to go through a very, very stringent approval process for deployment. And I would now like to review the approval process for deployment, if I may. The SWAT officer in charge at the scene of each SWAT deployment would take a look at the situation, and if he would propose that the UAS would be something that they would like to utilize, it would have to be brought up to the incident commander. The incident commander and the SWAT officer in charge would have to go to the on-scene Counterterrorism Special Operation Bureau command staff officer, that is of the rank of commander or above, to request permission to have a UAS deployment approved. If that CTSOB command staff officer at the commander or above level agrees, the process is not yet complete. That command staff officer must call the commanding officer of Counterterrorism Special Operations Bureau, who is a deputy chief rank, and that person has to give the final authority to deploy the UAS. Immediately after that, a call will be made to the director of the Office of Special Operations. That's the rank of assistant chief. And then I would make notification to the chief of police and subsequent notification to the police commission subcommittee members. That would be the process. So this is not a sergeant at the scene of a SWAT call out that's making that decision. Not even the SWAT OIC can unilaterally make it. Not even the command staff officer from Counterterrorism Special Operations Bureau who is mandated to be at the scene of such a deployment. It must go through that level of review. The next very critical piece that I would like to review right now with you is the permissible and prohibited deployment of the UAS. And now I'm going to refer, for specificity's sake, to the draft guidelines. A small unmanned aerial system may be deployed to provide enhanced situational awareness solely during the following circumstances or types of incidents: barricaded suspects, and there's a 4-part delineation process there, active shooter incidents, assessments of explosive devices and explosions, hostage situations, natural disasters, hazardous material incidents, search and rescue operations, and SWAT perimeter searches of armed criminals. And when we talk about searches on perimeters, in this regard, we're talking about a very restricted and limited set of circumstances where the suspect involved has superior weaponry, may have body armor, and has assaulted a police officer. Prohibited uses. The small unmanned aerial system shall not be deployed or used in violation of the law or the Constitution, unless a lawful exception applies. Department personnel shall obtain a search warrant or other lawful process when required under the Fourth Amendment or other provision of the law. Deployment of the UAS is not to be used to circumvent situations where a search warrant must be obtained by law. It is not to be used to circumvent the Fourth Amendment. I have to underscore that. I cannot make that any more clear. The SUAS shall not be deployed when weather conditions or other hazards prevent the safe operation of the aircraft, and that is, again, going back to FAA requirements, and again, something that the program manager would be reviewing. In addition, the SUAS shall not be deployed in a manner that exceeds the manufacturer's recommendations. Here is the very, very critical underscoring. The SUAS shall not be deployed or used with any weapons capabilities, including any non-lethal or less lethal weapons systems. The next area I'd like to review from our guidelines is video recording. When the department would examine models of SUAS, most of them on the market have recording capabilities. It is the clear understanding of the department that we would be preserving those recordings, and I'd just like to share with you the thought process behind that. Most models of UAS on the market now save their video imaging on a memory card. After the deployment of a SUAS, during the recording process, the memory card would be capturing those images. Upon completion of that, that memory card would be assigned a tracking number through Scientific Investigation Division and stored at SID with a tracking number basically preserved as evidence. And on the, taking you back to the deployment log, there's also a box that records the number that would be assigned to the individual memory card so that it would be placed in storage for safekeeping. It wouldn't be left in a drawer someplace. It wouldn't be left in somebody's desk. It wouldn't be left in an area where it could be compromised. And I think that's very important to share with you. Documentation and inspection, again.
Just back to the video recordings, and
Yes.
that the timeline for saving the videos is the same as digital in-car video and body cameras, correct?
Yes, Commissioner Johnson, it would be consistent with department policy for digital in-car video, DICV, and body-worn video, BWV. Yes, it would. How long is that? Now, I'd like to turn to the log once again, and to get back to the point, just to underscore here that the number of that particular memory card would be recorded on that log. These logs would also be stored at Counterterrorism Special Operations Bureau, the original document, a copy provided to the commission after the deployment, and the approval process here, and a copy would also be retained at Metropolitan Division's station. Talking about status reports and program evaluation. In addition to the continual report back to the subcommittee, there would also be quarterly reports proposed by the Office of Special Operations to the full commission. The pilot program, if approved, upon its conclusion, there would be a comprehensive report that would be presented first to the Chief of Police, Chief Beck, and then to the Commission. That would be a very detailed overview looking at the advantages of the system, best practices, lessons learned, problems encountered, taking a hard look at deployment savings, time savings, monetary savings, and any concerns that have been brought forth through any individual deployment, collective deployment, or overall program changes that would be much more beneficial than what the current policy would be advocating. So as the department looks forward to the discussion on these guidelines, it truly does want to hear from the public to ensure that the concerns that have already been brought forth have been thoughtfully incorporated in what we're presenting you with today. And then, if necessary, to make modifications to ensure that the public trusts that we continue to work hard to deserve and to earn is not at all given any feeling of compromise by the adaptation of any additional technology by the department. So as we look forward, we will once again be posting the guidelines on the department's website, and that's lapdonline.org. Also, we will be reactivating the email address for public comment, which is suas@lapd.online. And we will also make any of that information available here or to folks afterwards. Also, the mailing address, even though we only received one letter the last time, will continue to be receiving mail, and that will be LAPD Office of Special Operations, SUAS Pilot Project, P.O. Box 30158, Los Angeles, California, 90030. And this concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Any commissioner questions or comments? We can go down the line, starting with Sandra.
Thank you. I had more questions, but you've answered 4 out of 6, so thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Ms.
How many
Figueroa.
are we talking about purchasing?
Speak closer into the microphone.
How many UASs are we purchasing?
Commissioner Sandra Figueroa Villa, we have not actually talked about the numbers. I have not had that discussion yet with Chief Beck. We at all did not want to be presumptuous. in doing so. So we would hope that we would have the purchasing ability so that if one of the crafts would go down for manufacturing reasons, just something where it breaks, that we would have the ability not to be out of commission to have its use reinstituted.
Okay, and then as I was reading the definitions and then the responsibilities, that's where I had questions because it got a little confusing. But the way you explained it was much more clear to the public. So if we can
Thank you.
clarify that.
Thank you very
When we
much.
put it online.
Yes.
And then the last thing, when it's finally approved, when we finally approve SWAT to go ahead and use this, and it's gone to the two subcommittee commissioners, will we get notified through RACER?
Okay, so I've been letting people sort of chat amongst themselves because I have a little note in front of me that says, are you really being disruptive? Now you are being disruptive. Sir, this is your final warning. Sir, I just want you to stop for 1 second. Do you hear me? This is your final warning. Oh, okay, so can you please sit down so we can continue? Thank you. Can you please sit down and continue? Go ahead, Sandy.
Once we approve the use of it on that day, and will all
Sir,
commissioners be
this
notified
is your
by
final
RACER?
warning. I'm going to ask you to
Yes.
sit down.
I'll be happy to put that out there.
Sandy, keep going.
There still will be a several-week process if approval were to occur, because again, we have not purchased anything. We have to get the FAA certification and approval. So there would still be several weeks afterwards, but we would gladly put that notification out immediately to
Thank you so much, Chief.
Thank you.
I have, my turn?
Commissioner President.
Okay. I have one clarification, or you can consider it a modification request, and then one question.
Yes.
My clarification for modification
Yes.
would be that it is very clear that every time one of the drones, if there are two or if there are one, is used, that it should be made public through the commission in that quarterly report. So there won't, if the report has to be redacted for some legal reason, I understand, but I think it's important that that the public, and I took this from a comment that was made during one of the public meetings from the Electronic Frontier Foundation's attorney. There should be a paper trail so the public can see when the drones are flown. So I think it should be clear. I think it should be clear that they will be made public if it's used twice in a year or 5 times in a year.
Thank you.
The second issue is a question. Sometimes, 2 nights ago, horrible, tragic emergencies can occur. And my question is, the efficiency of timing in the approval process based on the issue, based on the problem. And I'm concerned that efficiency is important.
Understood. There would still be the tactical deployment of resources at the scene of something like that. And coinciding directly parallel with that would be the approval process going on and the evaluation. And it takes strictly a matter of minutes to have that. And I remember on August 8th, you brought up that concern too. It would be ours, and I don't know if Chief Beck wants to add to that, but we are in contact within minutes of each other. So, but of course, I would understand your concern there as well.
Okay.
Yes, Commissioner.
I'm sorry, just to answer your first question though, because you had 2 points.
Yeah.
I believe that the report is very clear that on the quarterly report,
Yes.
every incident is reported quarterly,
Yes.
publicly,
Okay.
to the
Okay.
commission and
Absolutely.
to the public.
We just, just
Understood.
like Sandy said, clarify the language because
Not a
the
problem.
language is for the public, not just for us.
Understood.
And Commissioner, certainly, at least initially, in my weekly updates, I'll advise if we've used any of these devices.
Thank you, sir.
So that'll.
Thank you, Chief.
Commissioner McLean Hill?
Okay. So I actually do have a number of questions and want to start by, noting that, as I think we're all aware, this is a matter of extreme interest by, by the citizenry at large. And I am grateful that we have adopted a policy which considers these items and then, without taking action, provides time for additional public review and input prior to them coming to the commission for actual definitive consideration. I think Commissioner Goldsmith indicated that the public outreach process around this item was less than perfect. I think I've been pretty open about my frustration with how that was executed.
Yes.
But nevertheless, there has been and remains time for the public to communicate with this commission in a variety of ways. And clearly the number of cameras present is also indicative of the level of interest. This is not a small thing.
I understand.
Also, I want to be, I want to really acknowledge the concerns about relative to trust and transparency, not just, directed at this department, but when it comes to surveillance and the loss of privacy and what we're told and what occurs, there's not always been perfect alignment between what's said and what occurs. So I only say that because I don't believe that we should be at all surprised by or frustrated or offended by the questions, the skepticism, and the the tumult around this issue. And then finally, I'm well aware of, and I think that we have to be open and honest about the fact that there are perspectives and areas that are very concerned, not only about militarization, about over-policing, about, just this conjures up the worst. With that said, I want to compliment the work of the subcommittee and the department in seeking to limit in these guidelines the utilization of this technology to situations that are clearly designed to enhance the safety of those responding. And that is a fair and legitimate course to pursue. I am not clear, and so you or Commissioner Johnson can clarify for me the report back. Were these guidelines to be adopted, or were this pilot process to be adopted? When I read the item, it appeared as if the quarterly report back was to the subcommittee, not to the full committee, and that the actual, I'm pretty good at reading, so I was clear that that's what I saw, and then the full report to the commission was to take place at the year mark. Am I incorrect about that? Is the is there a quarterly report back to
Well,
the full
it's
commission?
process for commission. Did you want to?
No, I'm
comment
just
on that?
asking what's in the guidelines. I'm not asking how the
We
process
were,
gets
we were going
determined.
to be doing the quarterly report to the subcommittee, but if
No, no,
there's an
so-
interest in it coming to the full commission.
Yes.
Again, I don't want to speak for the commission and the
No, I was
process
simply
here.
asking about what was in the guidelines.
no,
'cause
I-
just
I
wanted to be
understand that, and I'm
clear
just trying to
that I
respond.
understood that was the case, because I thought that I heard you say a minute ago that the
Yeah.
quarterly report would be to the full commission, so I was.
Right, you're right, and I was actually confused also. So the subcommittee is receiving information about every deployment as it occurs, and then there's monthly summaries
Yes.
that are prepared also for the
Subcommittee.
subcommittee.
Correct.
Um,
Quarterly reports to the
and
commission.
your comment on the quarterly coming back to the full commission, I think, is a good one, and I would support having the quarterly come back to the full commission for public
I'll
discussion.
ensure clarity on that.
Yeah, that was my comment
Yeah,
as well.
I think
And
that-
I'll ensure clarity.
Yeah, I think that would be a critical component were the pilot program to go forward. In addition to that, I had questions about the permissible uses. Active shooter incidents are pretty clear. Explosive devices, hostage situations, the hazardous material incidents. I'm sort of interested, I guess, in that. Because, for instance, when you described these, you actually had some additional or illuminating criteria around some of these, because, and the reason I'm interested in hazardous materials is because I see, several of those a day, it feels like. And also with respect to, search and rescue operations, I certainly understand. And but the perimeter search of armed criminals, that to me seemed like a pretty wide door. And again, when we're talking about barricaded suspects, active shooters, those sorts of things, but the perimeter searches of armed criminals just seemed, I looked at that and thought, okay, well, we'll just deploy all day, all the time.
No, and I'm happy. I'll start with the hazardous material incidents. There may be times where there could be something, for example, I'll use an example here, a radiological type material, something where for a human being, even in protective equipment and protective gear, to approach, to evaluate the necessity of where do we go from here, involving other agencies such as county health, it would be much wiser and much more safe to have some visual that could come closer to evaluation of, for example, labels on an item, leakage of an item, things like that, where it would be more educated on the part of the first responder or whoever to know what that item may be, and it may elucidate what that item is. Does that provide
The perimeter searches?
Yes. Again, when we're talking about permissible uses, this is for the Special Weapons and Tactics team. And when we're talking about this specific type of perimeter search, we're talking about it in the case where we have a suspect with superior weaponry, let's say an AK-47, fully automatic weapon, and they have that superiority where traditional resources that would respond would be immediately overwhelmed by that threat. And that would include body armor. I take you back, for example, to a North Hollywood shootout.
No, I do understand, and I'm clear about, and have, I'm absolutely clear about those situations where law enforcement is overwhelmed, frankly, by the capacity of the threat that they're confronting. But this doesn't say that, so I would look for. I would look for something
Sure.
that would.
So the
protect-
threshold is only this is only to be deployed by SWAT. So it has to meet the requirements for a SWAT call out for it even to fall within to fall within the category. So for example, if you have a stolen car where someone with a gun jumps out, that does not warrant a SWAT call out. SWAT is not called out for that. If there is an individual on a street corner with a gun, that does not warrant a SWAT call out. So it's very limited circumstances where the threshold is hit that it warrants a SWAT call out, and there is a perimeter search for that armed individual.
It may also be helpful to note, year-to-date, SWAT call-outs have numbered 76, and that's taking us through the end of September. So you can see that a SWAT is not routinely going out there several times a day on incidents. Is a special weapons and tactics team that has been delineated as such because it is responding to very specific criterias.
I do understand, and while I rarely quote, probably never, the California governor who became President Reagan, the idea of trust but verify is important to me as we move through this process. And so I would still, as we continue to think through the potential adoption of guidelines, look for something that ties that criteria more directly to either barricaded suspects or active shooter incidents, or something that narrows or specifically puts in even greater context what and when the device could be deployed. And then finally, and this is not in the recommendations.
Can we talk about that point for a second and then move on to your next one? See if this works.
Yeah.
Is it? So what if we added in the? If you want to come back to it, we can. But
if you want to wordsmith it now, that's fine.
What if we, in the permissible uses section, made it clear that it had to meet the threshold for a SWAT call out, and then it has to also hit one of the bullet points? Because that is clearly the intention,
yes.
But it is not as clearly stated as it should.
That might work. I mean, I'm not going to commit to it, but
Okay.
I would be
Well, let's
interested.
have that for what's publicly
Will do.
publicly
I
drafted.
think that
There'll
would be an
we-
improvement. but-
And the point of this is to have another round at changes over the next 2 weeks. But let's at least, we'll incorporate that change in addition to the earlier change into what is publicly posted.
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson, I have a
That's a helpful clarification. I know Commissioner Figueroa has a related question to that, if you don't mind holding off on your next question.
I know that SWAT goes out on lots of calls for backpacks. How would this work?
That would be the bomb squad that goes out on that.
Okay.
So that would be, and they would not be using the SUAS.
So that wouldn't be assessment of explosive device, or
No, that would be, that would not, that would be.
that wouldn't fall under that category.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. And then the other, and as I said, it's not currently contemplated or addressed in the guidelines, but is something that does, it relates to the video and the use of video. And I suspect that, again, if we are very narrowly employing devices in order to deal with situations that specifically address safety of responders, then it may be something that I get past. But I am curious, or not curious, I am not settled around the various ways in which technology can be leveraged, may be leveraged. You've addressed the weaponization issue, but there are a variety of other issues relative to surveillance and the way in which that material can be used to set up digital databases that are far more intrusive than we may appreciate. I do believe it's a legitimate public concern, and something that at least I continue to, that I'm grappling with, and I suspect will be grappling with in a much more significant matter as we move forward. But as I said, that didn't come up, and maybe something to discuss as we move forward. That does conclude my response and reaction to the guidelines. I sincerely look forward to the public input that will be, I imagine, coming in pretty significant waves over the next couple of weeks. And do, though, want to again acknowledge that the committee and the department has sought, I think, in a very straightforward and sincere way to be responsive to many of the known concerns. But this is not a small matter, so I appreciate the work.
Thank you for your input.
Public comment? Oh.
Any other questions?
No, did you have any
No.
comments? Okay, we'll go to public comment.
We have 19 public comment cards. The first 3 are Jerry Dietrich, Audrey George, and Tiffany Guerra.
My name is Jerry Dietrich, and I'm with Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. A lot of what I have to say today is what I've said before, but I'm going to repeat myself in hopes I'll be heard. I find it amazing that you profess to be the voice of the public, of the people. According to your website, quote, "Commissioners' concerns are reflective of the community at large." You admit that the people do not want drones, yet that the issue keeps coming up on your agenda. I'm hopeful that during the 2 weeks for public input period on this proposal, the input of the public will be like all other input from the public that says no drones. If anyone wanted to listen to what the public says, go back to the 4 meetings throughout the city where the public, 95% of them, said no to drones. I understand you know the people do not want drones. I don't understand. I'm sorry, I don't understand. You know the people do not want drones. You profess to be the voice of the public. Therefore, tell back no drones. Oh, I also wanted to say this woman what she said happened at the 4 meetings. I was only able to attend 1 meeting, at the Westwood meeting, and no use of public comment cards was allowed. It was only question and answer. And if you don't believe me, ask Shane Goldsmith, because she was sitting right there.
Next, we have Audrey George.
So it seems like y'all took some sort of secret vote or something, because like Sandra doesn't seem to be the only voice that is already assuming that you're going to be purchasing drones, using them, approving these policies and pilot program, etc. I want to ask, how do you, commissioners, differ from those of the Sheriff's Civilian Oversight? You are a body that rubber stamps approval whenever the LAPD needs it. They aren't. They understand that oversight requires guts, integrity, and a moral compass. You don't. They put their phones down and listen to the community members' expressions of distrust and fear about further militarization of local law enforcement. They are able to do the analysis about mission creep, knowing about the perversion of the original intent for SWAT and how that will affect our perception of the drone program. Commissioner Kennedy on that body, hearing the community's concerns, did his own personal research, looking at studies that investigated how children get physical and psychological trauma from the presence of drones in their community, and then he voted no. They understand that their role may involve making hard decisions, but they don't see Sheriff McDonald as their boss the way you see Chief Beck as your boss. They understand that protecting constitutional rights should not be the bottom line when civil rights are at stake. They voted to go to ground the Sheriff's Department's drones, which were already even being used. They understand the value of a historical perspective and a national current events awareness. And they understand that because of those things, we know that future weaponization is a given if drones are permitted. No drones for the LAPD.
Tiffany
No
Guerra,
misleading,
followed by
vague, and
Herman, Pastor
unenforceable
Q, and
policies.
Michael Wilson.
Next speaker was who?
Tiffany Guerra, followed by Herman, Pastor Q, and Michael Wilson.
So I'm going to read a quote by Commissioner Osen of the Sheriff's Commission. Other agencies have demonstrated that the use of drones may not deliver on the purported law enforcement benefits. For example, use of drones by agencies such as U.S. Customs and Border Protection has come under fire for the significant cost of operating the program with little to show for it in the way of drug interdiction and apprehension of individuals attempting to cross the border without authorization. While the law enforcement benefits are questionable, the intrusion on the privacy interests of the public are very real. Given this, and the very clear evidence of harm that the use of drones can produce in the most vulnerable communities in Los Angeles, I am in favor of grounding the drones permanently. And I wanted to raise that statement because it sums up a lot of the conversation at the Sheriff's Oversight Committee, how there was little tangible evidence of the usefulness of drones, even by agencies that have used them more extensively, and how the commissioners, in the commissioner's words, the Sheriff's Department and the Fire Department already have a huge arsenal, as SWAT does, with which to respond to all the situations that we see them requesting the drones for. And while we see a lack of evidence for their effectiveness, there is very clear evidence of the harm that adding police presence and technology can inflict. Folks who live in neighborhoods where helicopters patrol speak of the worry, anxiety, and anger they can feel just by hearing the noise of a helicopter. You talk about community policing, but is that what you think it looks like? Over-policing the community to the extent that folks feel distrust and trauma? What about the community's health? You talk about saving lives with drones. What about the lives of community members who are saying, no, we don't want this? Also stated by Commissioner Osen, the countervailing interests of the public have not been sufficiently appreciated in the conversation about drones. These concerns have not been overblown. At every step in the process, we have seen the LAPD and this board discount input from the community, and we see the LAPD's word get treated as if it were factual. Charlie Beck has simply to say something for Steve Soboroff to take it as a fact. How can oversight exist in this climate? You have not been listening to the community, which is your job. You have not been pushing back on the LAPD. If you could not do that, you have no place on this board. The trust does not exist for a drone program to be implemented, and drones are not needed for LAPD and SWAT to do their jobs. Vote no on these guidelines.
Mr. Herman?
So we're speaking about a not perfect system and the vague and ambiguous idea of our violations of the constitutional civil rights of the majority, which is all of us here who have participated in all these meetings. And as the last speaker mentioned, there was no cards. You couldn't fill out a card. QA, question and answer, wrong answer. But again, as long as there's a threshold that is larger than Steve Soboroff's shiny head, everything will go through. Everything. So you're not listening to the threat here. The threat is people feel threatened by this so-called unmanned aerial system. So if you want to define a way to have a perfect system, then it needs to wait upon the concerns of the public. That's what the Brown Act states. The Brown Act says, we the people yield no sovereignty to anybody at local level to make decisions on what we need to be heard upon. And Cynthia McHill has made it very clear for us all that your threshold is vague and ambiguous. It violates our civil rights. It violates the city policy and so-called codes of municipalness. So until you determine what we wish to be heard upon, what we plan to say on these drones, then I am saying as of now, we oppose, and you must sustain on passing this without further comment.
Pastor Q.
Good morning.
Good morning.
There's a historical relationship that needs to be considered. Black, brown, and poor communities have been overwhelmingly occupied by law enforcement. So the pain that people are feeling or the opposition that you're hearing didn't come from anywhere. Let me give you a personal example. About 10 years ago, I was in a public housing complex, and a helicopter shined its light on me. And they shined the light, and I had a little cousin in the back seat and my girlfriend to the right of me. Next thing you know, cops swarmed. I fit the description of a murder suspect, but I have never murdered anybody in my life. My cousin was terrified. And with that in mind, you think I'm going to say, yeah, we should have drones, especially after we've just used a helicopter, the ghetto bird, and shot somebody out of a helicopter. Historically, policies does nothing for us. Historically, the policy doesn't apply to us. They may apply to communities that have money and that can keep people accountable and can keep law enforcement accountable. We have kids as young as 12 months old on gang databases. 12 months old. Did y'all hear what I said? We have kids that's young as 12 months old. As a pastor, how can I agree with that? This trauma that you guys are hearing, and a whole lot of it, no to those drones.
Next, we have Michael Wilson, followed by Adam Smith, Jed Perriott, and Karen Hilfman.
I want to start by addressing a story. Many of Americans have heard this story. It's about this crazy, so-called crazy doctor who stayed in his laboratory and he created this being, right? And through lightning and all of his genius, this being came to life. And it was considered a monster. So the whole town chased this monster. The whole time, the monster caused no harm. And then we pegged this monster Frankenstein. But the reality was, the community, the people, they weren't chasing Frankenstein. They were chasing Frankenstein's monster. Why do I bring this story up? Because you, all on this board, are Frankenstein. You allow the monsters to keep terrorizing. You allow the monsters to keep intimidating. You allow the monsters to silence the voices of the people. So, we're no longer going to hunt the monster. We're coming for Dr. Frankenstein. And I'm very real when I tell you. See, I've lived with the monster, so I'm no longer afraid of the monster. And the people aren't either. We're tired of being killed. We're tired of being harassed. Guess what? You've taken our fear. Thank you. We appreciate that, because now what happens when you have no fear? You're ready to fight back. I'm standing right here to tell all of you, for a city and a people who have been terrorized, I am one of those people that hear that ghetto bird and get ashamed, get scared.
Next speaker, please.
Adam Smith.
Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith, sir, your time. No, his time's over. He's disrupting the meeting. Time's up. Thanks. You can come back in public comment, and we're happy to listen. We'll give you another full 2 minutes. Thank you, sir. It's your last warning, sir?
Stand up for your life. Stand up for your protection. Stand up for what's right. Maybe for us, for our future.
Okay, Mr. Smith? Come on up. Thank you, sir. Next speaker. Mr. Smith. Morning, sir.
When we say power to the people, we're talking about democracy.
Sir, you're disrupting the meeting because he's slowing down. I think I've given you, have I given you a last warning yet, sir? Okay, so this is his last warning. Next, go ahead, sir. Sorry.
You need to restart the clock.
Yeah, let's restart his clock. Sorry for the disruption.
Mic's off.
Sir.
So I'm here to talk about what a lot of people have talked about, which is just accountability. I appreciate what Commissioner McLean Hill has insinuated, that the police obviously don't care about public comment on this issue. I happened to be able to get to the Westwood meeting, and I think his name, I don't know his title, so I don't mean to be disrespectful, but Assistant Chief or Horace Frank. Like our friend here said earlier, we weren't allowed, there were no comment cards. And when I finally got to ask my question, he basically laughed me off, cut me off, and went on to the next person. It's like, where's the respect for the community? And you guys, and women, sorry, I don't mean to call you all guys. This commission is, here to act in the interest of the public and of the community. And if you're voting yes on these guidelines, and you honestly think that this program isn't going to exacerbate and already over-policed, already marginalized communities, you're totally in denial. And if you do know that, which I think all of you do, that's just, it's disgusting. And I grew up, thinking that the police did everything in the best interest of the communities, and I bring my kids around to make sure that they don't grow up the same way. So I'm totally against the drones. I'll say it a little loud for the folks in the back. No drones, LA, and fire Chief Beck.
Jed Peria.
Mr. Sobroff, how's that seat feel? Millionaire musical chairs up here, right? Different face, same bullshit. So after overwhelming opposition through emails, overwhelming opposition to drones at the community meetings, overwhelming opposition to drones at the Sheriff Civilian Commission, overwhelming opposition here today, you're still going for it. You're still going through with the drone program. Last Thursday at that Sheriff Oversight Commission, as I was talking about how drones are a weapon, a representative from the Sheriff's Office stared at me and rolled his eyes with a smile. This entire commission is a giant eye roll to everybody here. Maybe it's because, see all these rich folks up here, they know they're not going to be affected by the drone policy at all. Their kids won't be affected, right? Their kids and grandkids are going to grow up looking up at a blue sky and think, wow, what a nice day. I'm going to go for a bike ride. Look at the birds. Right. The kids and grandkids that will grow up in South and East LA are going to look up at a blue sky, and just like the children in the Middle East right now, they see that blue sky and they say, I don't know if I want to go out. That's drone weather. That's real. People are afraid of blue skies in places like Yemen. Because instead of hearing birds chirping, they're going to hear the buzzing of drones. That's trauma. Just like the helicopters, just like the SWAT teams. That's what the normalization of drones is going to do. I don't think you understand. This is a generational thing. You have 2 drones today. Next year you're going to ask for 20 more. The next year you're going to ask for 50 more. The drones are going to get smaller and cheaper. You're going to be able to hide them. You're going to be able to use them. and people will take pictures and say, look, that was a police drone. They'll come here and say, look, you used a drone without authorization. You'll say, nah, that wasn't ours.
Next, we have Karen Hilfman, followed by Melanie Ochoa, Mohammed Tayson, and Yvonne Michelle Autry.
I don't know if you realize how surreal this feels and looks, but sitting in the audience, it's really mind-boggling. Do you have a policy? Do you not have a policy? I don't think we know that. You're talking about guidelines, but guidelines for what? It feels like a boulder that's going downhill without the possibility for any reasoning or amount of community input to stop it. And that's the other surreal thing. The community has, again and again, in overwhelming percentages, said we don't want drones. So I want to remind you that you can reject this without going any further. You can. The chief's report states that the deployment will enhance the department's ability to protect and serve the public. It can be effective as a de-escalating tool in the preservation of life. So I want to ask, how in good conscience can you approve a program knowing full well that the department doesn't know how to protect public safety to begin with, or serve the most vulnerable members of the public, or de-escalate to begin with, to preserve human life? You hear again and again from the community, meetings, emails, letters, loud and clear, even from the meeting that you had in Watts, I think it was on September 19th. Nobody wants drones. It's a slippery slope.
Next, we have Melanie Ochoa.
So Ochoa, please. Time's up. Next speaker, please. So this is, thank you.
Melanie Ochoa with the ACLU of Southern California. The ACLU is disappointed in the Commission's continued resistance to actually listening to the community's concerns and acting accordingly. It is clear that the public wants more than just the opportunity to make comments around the edges of LAPD's proposed drone policy, and instead wants the Commission to put a halt to this program, completely due to legitimate privacy concerns and LAPD's history of ever-expanding use of surveillance technology and inability to hold officers accountable for violating department rules. The Commission received strong community opposition at the meeting when LAPD first presented its proposed drone plan. It received strong opposition in its 4 community outreach events, none of which were held in South LA. It received letters from over 1,600 individuals first asking it to step back and ask the community whether it should have drones in the first place. And when the Commission did not listen to that, over 1,900 people signed a petition demanding that LAPD not initiate a drone program unless and until the LAPD has gained the trust and consent of the community. This overwhelming opposition has all been ignored. And the ways in which the community has attempted to solicit inputs show that it does not really have a desire to be responsive to the community, but rather just make a show of engaging in a public process. All 4 of the community meetings were held simultaneously, and all were outside of the communities most likely to be impacted by the expanding use of surveillance. There was little advance notice. The Commission did not even provide notice at its own meeting that these forums had been scheduled. And in advance of today's meeting, the Commission initially posted the proposed policy, then revised Chief Beck's report 30 minutes later to remove the proposed drone policy so that the public would not have any indication of what the policy said in advance of this meeting. This is not the conduct of a commission that actually values a knowledgeable and engaged public. This lack of responsiveness and questionable conduct is precisely why the public does not trust the LAPD to act in a transparent way or not to continually push the boundaries in ways that violate the spirit, if not the letter, of any drone policy it creates. This commission should stop and listen to the outpouring of community opposition and not allow LAPD.
Thanks for your opinions.
Mohammed Tayson.
Good morning, Mohammed Tajsar from the ACLU of Southern California. The board's responsibility here is to serve as the ultimate policymaker for the department and to provide effective and independent.
Sir, speak into the mic, and I'm going to start your time over, okay?
Thank you.
Okay.
So the board's responsibility is to serve as the ultimate policymaker for this department, right? And to provide effective and independent oversight of that department. So in doing so, it must be responsive to the needs of members of this community, which is represented by the people in this room. So what does responsive in this context mean, right? I think this is the key point that I'd like to make. Responsiveness means not just to allow the public to speak, but to listen to the feedback when it gets it, right? So responsiveness, again, doesn't mean just creating the public fora, but to actually listen and respond to the public when the public overwhelmingly opposes the drone program, right? So, and I want to be clear here, right? So the overwhelming opposition isn't overwhelming opposition to particular policies or demand for a particular process for public comment, but it is opposition to end the entire program. So when you oppose the entire, so it's not about the particular policies, it's about ending the program. So I counted after the presentation, by my count, no more than 7% of the emails that came in were in favor of drones. No more than 7%, right? That's, in addition, we have overwhelming opposition that was expressed in the in-person meetings, and as well as all the almost 2,000 petitioners who signed a petition against the drone program, right? So consider your colleagues on the Sheriff's Civilian Oversight Commission. They actually listened to the public's overwhelming opposition, and they acted independently in discharge of their duties. So I ask that this board do the same thing. If you are really serious about your responsiveness to the community, you have to be serious about doing what the community asks of you, especially when that community's opposition is so overwhelming. Right? So now's not the time to argue about the policies. Now's the time to actually listen and say, look, we created this public space, we created this public process, and when the public comes and says we don't want it, then you got to be down with the public. You got to say we don't want it either. So I think that's that I think is the way for this commission to truly stamp its independence on this problem.
Thanks for your opinions. Next
we have Yvonne Michelle Autry, followed by Kai Utsami, DA, and Jamie Garcia.
I overwhelmingly support all of the previous speakers, and quite frankly, I find it really highly offensive that you continue to posture as if you're welcoming our comments when you're clearly not taking in consideration what we have expressed to you, that we do not want the drone. So not only are you liars, but this is a farce. This is a farce. So why are we here? Because you've already decided. We know that this is the new world order and the future is now, so it is imminent that if you do circulate the drones, they will, trust and believe, be armed. And we know who the targets are, primarily black people, those who you consider to be your very special threats to white supremacy, white Zionist male supremacy, or this new world order, which is on its way out. So again, for the record, we are against the drones. Just think about the Move 9, the capacity that armed paramilitary agency had in massacring those black people who were in they were not in commission of any crimes. I see the overwhelming majority of the chase videos of black people who are gunned down, non-black people who are chased. The police spend how millions of dollars chasing them. They are not fatally wounded. I don't know, there's something wrong with that picture? Is there something wrong with that picture? I know I'm not the only one who has seen the disparity. So this is on the record. We do not want it because we do not want to suffer any more fatalities in our community that are not provoked. As we continue to respond, we are against it. You are murdering us, and we will not allow this. This is on the record. Also, for the culpability, this is not the merger of church and state. We do not want the police state. We do not want the militarization of the police. We do not want this. We're not under martial law. So you're incriminating the community, and then you're going to arm the drones to exterminate those that you consider to be a threat to your authority.
Kai Utsami.
Next speaker, please. Next speaker, please. You want to Let the other people speak. Thank you. Next speaker.
Mr. Kaiutsami.
We've been coming here talking our public comment, and we're the real public, not what LAPD considers the public. Today, this guideline is written to fool the American public that drones is safe to use, you know, but we know that it's full of holes, that people and police do not always follow guidelines. In fact, there's been so many violations that this police commission has let it go. Because how did they let these the violations and murder go? Within policy, you know? And we know that predictive policing, LAPD's predictive policing, and past history and recent history of LAPD members killing, murdering unarmed black people. And you've heard all the family members come and ask for for the video, and you don't release it because you're afraid of the truth. Don't go talking about, you are not for the public good. You are dominating, you are more weapons, that's what drones are. The UAS is surveillance, and if that's approved, this guideline shouldn't even be talked about, because drones should not be talked about. If the UAS is approved, then militarized drones will come in, and it's all to target poor black and brown communities and criminalize them.
DA followed by Jamie Garcia.
Go ahead, sir.
Greetings, my name is DA. I'm a local Rastafarian. Stop LAPD spying, Black Lives Matter. As Trump and Jeff Sessions and Steve Soboroff tried desperately to dig their heels in with their temporary power grab, racist policing supporters expect everyone to fall in line with behind drones, even after 3 years of regime-ending protests in this country. Drones represent a return to the crazy, psychologically dysfunctional culture of the slave plantation here. Racist empires collapsing before our eyes because racists have no moral authority and much moral hypocrisy. And people are sick of it. The intense, expanding football protests show the ongoing resolve of the people against racist policing like drones. Racists expect subservience from non-whites, but they do not know why. In this collapsing slave plantation culture, racist drone supporters expect blacks to keep accepting racist white police presence without question. Racist drone supporters also expect whites to be able to question blacks' honesty, and they expect blacks to feel compelled to account for themselves and their character to white people. Racist drone supporters expect activists to keep allowing police agents to do surveillance in our meetings. Not. These police agents represent a reasonable threat, since I have been attacked and threatened by police agents multiple times in the past, so I will defend myself and others physically against such police agents into the future. The reality is that these drones will provoke the people to shoot at them, thereby lowering people's reluctance to shoot in general, thereby igniting a civil war. Creating a stable society now requires real changes, not a return to the past. As Tom Petty would say, there ain't no easy way out. I won't back down. No secret police. No secret police. No secret police.
Jamie Garcia followed by June Jackson, Ahmed Khan, and Nick Napolitano.
So I wanted to put the drones into the larger context of the architecture of surveillance, which LAPD has. We have trapwire, body cameras, automatic license plate readers, predictive policing, suspicious activity reporting, all of this supporting data-driven, evidence-based policing. So how long is the data going to be stored for? That question was not answered. Will facial recognition be used? Will people be entered into databases? And I'm saying this because this is demonstrating the lowering of the threshold for who gets entered into databases. So you don't even have to have police contact anymore to be entered into an LAPD database. So, and then is Palantir going to be used in this program as well? Because who is going to be organizing this data? You say it's going to be put into a nice lock and key, but we know that's not what LAPD is doing with their data. So the community 3 years ago completely rejected the use of drones. And you talk about your 1,600 plus surveys, people who have no budget even compared to the size of LAPD has, had over 3,000 petition signatures saying no to drones. This is with no budget at all. This is how much feedback we got. 200 surveys. We had promotoras saying, are they at war with us? Asking if LAPD is at war with the community. So you talk about community trust, there is none. There is no community trust. So what is the use of the police commission? And many people have stated this. Not once has the commission reduced the weaponization of LAPD. You oversee what the LAPD wants. You don't lead the LAPD, you don't decide. It appears that they decide for you and you comply. This is why we see you as a failed body. So again, going back to the lack of trust with LAPD, and I think Cynthia McLean-Hill approached on this. So we talk about mission creep in that opening, right? Well, SWAT's 50-year anniversary, and this is what's stated before in our press conference, that 35% of SWAT deployments now are for low-level drug offenses. So
June Jackson.
Next speaker.
Hello, my name is June Jackson. I'm a previous employee and a whistleblower of LA County Sheriff's Department. I'm here today to say to the Public and Police Commission, no to drones. The lady to my right stated that drones will be monitored and policy and guidelines will be followed. This is what's told to the public to pacify us. The lady also stated that drones will not be weaponized. This too is not true. Drones are already weaponized and being used to torture citizens in a clandestine manner. For 2 years and continuing, I have been a victim of microwave radiation, direct energy weapons, and heat weapons torture by satellites and drones hovering over my apartment every night and day, 24/7. And I'm not the only one this is happening to. The use of drones are already being abused, and we, the public, don't want drones. People are currently being harmed with them. You are forcing drones on the public and don't care what or how the public feels or about their concerns. Say no to drones. And all of you sitting here on this board, the policies and the things that you guys vote for and that you condone and uphold, you need to know you may not be given account today, but all of you might as well have harmed every individual that's going to be harmed with these weapons, because you guys will lift your eyes in hell and give an account for everybody that is harmed. That's the word of God. Okay, so all your monies and everything that you guys are getting today to go along, it's not going to be worth it when you spend eternity in hell.
Ahmed Khan, followed by Nick Napolitano.
Mr. Khan, you can start the clock.
Stop the torture of innocent people. Stop the murder of innocent people. You're liable and you will suffer. You will pay for that. And your children.
Did you start my clock again?
No. No, I told you. I said that the clock starts, and you chose to let somebody else speak. Go ahead.
You gave the white guy new time, but not him?
When put your ego in check. He wasn't even it's 11 seconds. It's a different person than the person who was speaking. Come on, Steve.
That's a different person than the person who was speaking.
You're not disrupting the meeting, you're disrupting the speaker.
Well, except, hold on. Can we just give him 2 minutes to speak? He didn't do anything different than some of the other speakers did, and they got more time. He just stood there. It's 2 minutes.
Okay, we'll give you 2 minutes. We'll give you 2 minutes. Go ahead. Start your 2 minutes now.
So, so this is, I think today's meeting is really at the heart of what civilian oversight really means. This battle is nothing new. The battle started in May of 2014 about the drones. At that time, the people spoke out very clearly and loudly, and the drones remained in a lock and key. Here's about 3,500 signatures. I mean, I want to point this to a subcommittee member, Shane Goldsmith, who's the president of Liberty Hill Foundation, supposedly a nonprofit, a social justice organization. They fund organizations to go out and organize the community and get community feedback, right? They want to listen to the community, at least what they purport to say. But here, 3,500 signatures, several town halls, a whole report. ACLU comes back with 1,900 signatures, only 7% of the people in the email agreeing with the department, all 4 community meetings and overwhelming rejection. The Sheriff's Civilian Oversight Commission rejects the drones, demands that they permanently ground them, and this body, this supposedly civilian oversight body, continues with the same practice. At what point, I mean, Shane Goldsmith, at what point do you even, I mean, what is your threshold? What is the threshold of this body? You signed on to the record management system without even knowing what that was. You signed on to Stingray technology knowing how the courts are speaking out about it. What is the threshold here? At what point? I mean, do you want us to bring, as they would do it in other countries, dead bodies to your door? Do you want us to get to that point where dead bodies are brought? Do you want to have families come to your door wailing and sharing their trauma? I mean, what is your threshold? At what point do you say no? Because it's quite evident.
Next speaker, please.
Nick Napolitano, followed by our last 3 speakers, Red Chief, Zach Sherwin, and General Jeff.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, my name is Nick Napolitano, fourth generation Angelino. Family's been here for over 100 years. I love the city, and I see the trend of what's going to happen. I'd like to make it clear that these drones will be weaponized from past experience. Everything on the military floor is coming to the city. We have Stingray technology, FLIR, radars. A lot of these technologies could be used in lieu of drones, but we know they won't. It's going to be mission creep. What I see before me are the gatekeepers for LAPD. That's what it is, gatekeepers. And some of the other stuff that's happened in other states, we've had ground drones blow up a shooter with C4. If that's not military, what is? In Philly, they dropped a bomb from a helicopter on a housing. Some of the technology that they're using on the military right now is directed energy weapons, are referred to as Iraqi poppers. And you can bet that this technology is going to be used on us soon. It harass, and it's actually tortures and maims over a long period, and it is lethal. It will kill you over time. The police departments are working in conjunction with fusion centers, and what I believe is trying to provoke individuals to commit crimes. Some of the names you might know are Myron May, Galvin Long, Aaron Alexis. All these here reported being targeted individuals of this technology. Maybe even this guy in Vegas, he might have been too. He might have been harassed, groomed, farmed by the agencies in conjunction with the police department and civilian people too. All right, thank you.
Our last three cards, Red Chief, Zach Sherwin, and General Jeff.
He's not here, so we'll go to the second one.
Red Chief. Is that him? No, not
Okay.
present. Zach Sherwin.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question about the number of emails we heard about before. There were 1,290 total, 97 negative, 165 positive, which is, as we've heard, almost twice as many. And then the 497 non-unique emails that we heard. What about the other 531 in that total number?
And I think you have to go back and just listen to what she said.
Excuse me?
If you go back and listen to what she said, she went through
She
it.
didn't say what they were. That's why I'm following up now.
Then you can talk to her afterwards. Go ahead.
Okay, sounds good. So then let's just have that, recognize the interaction that we just had. The other thing that I want to say while I'm up here, this is the first time that I've spoken at one of these meetings, though I've been attending for a while. And the amount of unintentional language that we've heard throughout the speaking today, saying things like, when we finally approve these guidelines, when theoretically this is supposed to be a meeting deciding whether or not you're going to approve the guidelines, it just betrays the kind of attitude that I think is prevalent among you up there. And I think, the speakers before me have spoken so eloquently to the fact that the opposition to these guidelines is overwhelming. I don't need to reiterate the points, but I'll just ask us to cast our memories back. And I just don't understand how it can be moving ahead in the way that it seems to be. And I hope that the sort of childish display with which you tried to start the clock early on someone who spoke so meaningfully and eloquently, I can only assume that's a reflection of the inner disconnect that you must feel between moving these guidelines ahead and the kinds of voices that we've heard today. And if it isn't the case, then I hope so. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your opinions. Next.
Our final card is General Jeff.
Before we go to the next speaker, Chief Gamal, do you want to address that issue of the other 400 email?
Yes, those were opposed to the drone UAS policy, and I did delineate in the summary
did.
what those points were.
You did. Yes, she did. Next.
General Jeff.
Good afternoon, Commission. My name is General Jeff, a proud Skid Row resident, a proud American. Based on the democratic process in this country, this is the United States of America, and in every vote, the majority rules. And in this matter of drones, the majority has already ruled and has already spoken. We, the people of America, have spoken. We, the people of the city of Los Angeles, have spoken. We don't want drones. It's real simple. It's impossible to fathom that this commission will somehow try to go along with LAPD's report as if there's overwhelming support for it. All it is LAPD just wants more toys to play with while they target people's lives and wreck people's lives. That doesn't justify a yes vote on this. This needs to be shut down and respect the democratic process in this country. This country, this city of Los Angeles, is a part of the United States of America. How dare this commission go above and beyond the democratic process? You are all out of your fucking minds.
Go ahead.
Just a couple of things. This has been a illuminating hearing. I just have a few observations, just in response to, or to just based on some of the things that have been said. So, the LAPD does not currently have a program. The guidelines that are being proposed today, just so we're all really clear about the process and where we are in the process, the guidelines that are being proposed today are guidelines that would cover a pilot program were they to be accepted and were the commission to approve the establishment of a pilot that would permit the use of drones under certain conditions. I know, pains many people in this audience to hear some of the things that they perceived to be said from this dais. There are times, I just have to say, that it's sometimes painful sitting at the dais to hear some of the language that's directed at us as commissioners. Please let me finish, please. I recognize that with position and with power comes the responsibility to listen no matter what, and I do. What I want to be clear about, please let me finish, is the reason there is no program is because the community rallied and asserted itself, and there is no program. There is no decision being made today. In 2 weeks, this matter will be considered, and I know I will be paying very close attention, not just to what the department seeks to do, but to the input that we have been given, to the context and the history, and to what occurs over the next 2 weeks. And I believe that other commissioners will do the same. This is not a perfect process, but it's what we got. And I appreciate with every fiber of my being all of the work that everyone is putting into trying to get us to the right decision, and want to respect and honor everybody's perspective, both in the department and outside of the department. But I just want to underscore, there is no decision. There is a proposal. We are not flawless in how we're going about considering the proposal, but we are considering and have provided as a commission, are trying to make sure that we provide ample time and opportunity for not just input, but reflection. And to the extent that there is a point of view that what you say doesn't matter, that is probably the thing that's most difficult to hear week after week. It's not true, and I can't believe that you believe fundamentally that it's not true, because you keep speaking, and that is to be credited. So that's really all I wanted to say about this.
Thank you, Commissioner. Well said. Commissioner Goldsmith?
It's time for me to move. Make the motion.
Go ahead.
So I'd like to make the motion to accept the department's report and direct the department to post on the department's website the SUAS deployment guidelines as amended today by Commissioner Sobroff and McLean Hill for a period of 2 weeks for public input.
We have a second. All those I'm sorry?
Mr. President, I just wanted to clarify, there were some questions and comments about the report coming back quarterly to the commission rather than to the committee. Do you want that revised in the draft that is posted?
Yes, I said revised according to what Sobroff and McLean Hill said, so specifically reporting to the public, and the other one was clarifying the perimeter search.
Right. Very good. Thank you.
Wait, hold on.
It was actually an overall clarification that it is subject to SWAT call-out processes.
Yeah.
Very good. Just wanted to clarify. I'm sorry.
Okay. Did you second, Matt?
I did
second. Oh, I'm sorry.
I did
okay.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed?
It's
approved. Next
the
item.
Draft for posting. It's not the adoption of the program.
No, what we're approving is the motion. So let me just ask Mr. Teefank one more time to say, can you explain the process from here? What was approved today and what wasn't approved today? Mr. Teefank, just clarify again. Mr. T? Okay.
Mr. President, what the commission action was today was upon the revision of the proposed guidelines. Those proposed guidelines will be posted on the department's website for public comment, as Chief Grimala mentioned. In 2 weeks, it will come back to you for, at that time, your final consideration to approve, modify, or to not approve. And also the department will report back on the public comment that is received over those 2 weeks period. And there'll be another public hearing for the public to comment.
Thank you, sir. Okay, let's move item number 3, report of the chief. Okay, we're moving on. Report of the chief. Chief, welcome, sir.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning.
Okay, so we're being disruptive now. I'm going to give you a final warning to stop being disruptive. We're going to recess the meeting. If it happens again, we're going to call the meeting. This meeting is recessed. We would like to have the room cleared.
I think we have to come back here.
The meeting is recessed. Please clear the room.
Sandra Figuera is an ED of a nonprofit where they set their staff and their community together.
Actually, that's your last one. Let's do it away from the
And it's a nonprofit. Sandra, don't you get your folks, people to sign petitions? This is what you do. That's Fire Charlie Beck. Fire Charlie Beck. Fire Charlie Beck. Fire Charlie Beck.
I better put the light on. Okay. Before I get to the numbers, on behalf of Chief Beck and the entire department, we want to thank the community for their outpouring of concern to us here on a smaller level with regard to the amount of department personnel that were actually in Las Vegas at the concert event, which was so tragically concluded on October the 1st. We had over 70 employees who were actually there at the time. What I would like to note is how many of them, many who had an EMS background, actually assisted in triage of victims at that location. We've actually received reports back from the Las Vegas community about that, and with the heaviness of our hearts and the sadness that we feel, and we will continue to feel for the longest period of time, we just wanted to acknowledge that in some acts of bravery, not only from our department members, but also from the law enforcement community and the heroes within the general public who had no law enforcement affiliation, but acted in a heroic manner. And we wanted to recognize that here today. I'd like to go over a few of the crime numbers here. I think one of the most significant is as we look at the homicide numbers year to date in comparison to 2016, we are down 7.7%. We had a fairly good week following last week's. Of particular note, too, we'd like to take a look at shootings. Shots fired and victim shot is down year to date. For shots fired, down 12.4%, and victim shot, 8%. Those are significant as we continue the deployment of CSOC in areas in South Bureau and also in Central Bureau. That is a very flexible deployment of not only our motor assets, but our Metropolitan Division assets to address community concerns about crimes of violence there on the street. So the CSOC deployment has truly been notable and is making a significant impact there as well. Moving over to traffic statistics here, looking citywide, we're up slightly at 1.2% looking year to date, but we are heartened to see that in A's and K injuries, the most serious being A's and K's being fatalities, we show year to date minus 4.4% for the most serious injuries and for those traffic collisions ending in someone's death, minus 6.7%. So when we look at our total A&K picture, we are down from 1,045 in 2016 to 995 year-to-date in 2017. We are committed to the Vision Zero program put out by the mayor's office. We have resources committed not only within the Office of Special Operations, but in patrol jurisdictions as well as in the 4 traffic bureaus. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Next is public comment. There are no public comments. Next is we'll go into closed session, and since there are no public comments on closed session, we will now adjourn into closed session.
The Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss item number 5A1 and 5A2 in accordance with Government Code 54957. And 5B, the hearing examiner reappointments.
We're good to go?
The Board of Police Commissioners has concluded its work in closed session. We are back in open session. In closed session, item 5A1 was discussed and the chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted. In closed session, item 5A2 was discussed and the chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted. Item 5B was discussed. The recommendation was adopted. Mr. President, is there a motion to adjourn?